January 26, 1945. Holtzwihr, France. Snow fell in thick curtains across the Colmar pocket, turning the frozen Alsatian forest into a maze of white silence, broken only by the distant rumble of German armor. Lieutenant Audie Murphy, 20 years old, stood in a frozen field, watching 6 German Panther tanks and approximately 250 infantry emerge from the tree line 200 yards away, advancing directly toward his position. His entire company, 127 men 12 hours earlier, had been reduced to 18 soldiers and 2 tank destroyers. One of those tank destroyers, an M10 Wolverine, sat burning 30 yards behind him, its 3-man crew dead, its ammunition cooking off in sporadic explosions that sent metal fragments screaming through the air. Every manual, every training doctrine, every tactical principle Murphy had learned in 3 years of combat across North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and France said the same thing. Withdraw immediately, establish a defensive line behind the woods, radio for artillery support, and wait for reinforcement. The mathematics of the situation were absolute. 18 riflemen against 250 German soldiers, supported by 6 tanks, meant annihilation within minutes. But Murphy had spent the previous 19 days watching German counteroffensives push American forces back across the same frozen ground they'd taken at terrible cost, and he understood something his superiors did not yet grasp. If this position fell, the entire Colmar offensive would collapse. The Germans would reach the Rhine crossings, and the war in Europe would extend into summer, with casualties numbered in the tens of thousands. What the men running toward the burning tank destroyer didn't know was that the skinny Texas farm boy with a 6th-grade education was about to do something so statistically impossible that German commanders would later refuse to believe the after-action reports, something that would rewrite American infantry doctrine and create a legend that would save lives in Korea, Vietnam, and every American conflict for the next 80 years. 23 days earlier, Operation Nordwind had shattered the illusion that Germany was finished. Hitler's last major offensive in the West slammed into American positions across Alsace-Lorraine with 21 divisions, approximately 280,000 men, driving towards Strasbourg and threatening to cut off the entire U.S. 7th Army. Allied intelligence had completely missed the build-up. Major General Jacob Devers, commanding the 6th Army Group, found himself fighting a 2-front battle. German forces attacking from the north, while the Colmar pocket, a German-held salient 35 miles deep and 25 miles wide, anchored the southern flank. The 3rd Infantry Division, Murphy's unit, received orders to eliminate the pocket. Between January the 22nd and 26th, they'd advanced through Bavie, the same frozen forest 5 times, taking casualties at a rate of approximately 12% daily, unsustainable by any military calculation. Captain James Cagney, no relation to the actor, commanding officer of Company B, had watched his unit shrink from full strength to less than 15% combat effective. 3 conventional solutions had failed catastrophically. First, concentrated artillery bombardment. The 3rd Division fired 14,700 rounds into German positions on January 23rd. When infantry advanced, they discovered the Germans had constructed bunkers so deep that even direct hits from 155mm howitzers left them combat capable. Casualties: 47 men in 2 hours. Second, tank-led assault. On January the 24th, 8 M4 Sherman tanks supported by 2 companies of infantry tried to punch through German lines. The narrow forest roads channeled the armor into kill zones where German 88mm anti-tank guns, positioned in concealed emplacements, destroyed 5 Shermans in 17 minutes. Casualties: 23 tankers killed, 89 infantry casualties. Third, flanking maneuver. Late on January the 25th, 2 platoons attempted to circle through the woods and attack German positions from the rear. They walked directly into a minefield the S2 intelligence section hadn't detected. Casualties: 31 men, including both platoon leaders. Colonel Michael Paulick, commanding the 15th Infantry Regiment, stated the assessment shared by every officer in the chain of command. The German defensive positions in the Colmar Pocket represent the most formidable fortifications we've encountered since Cassino. They have superior fields of fire, pre-registered artillery coordinates, and the advantage of fighting from prepared positions in weather that favors defense. Our casualty rates are approaching 15% daily. At this rate, we'll have combat ineffective units within 96 hours. The mathematical reality is brutal. We're trading 3 American lives for every German casualty. This is unsustainable. Major General John O'Daniel, commanding the 3rd Infantry Division, shared Paulick's pessimism. His January 25th situation report to General Devers stated, "Enemy resistance unexpectedly fierce. Terrain favors defense. Weather conditions prevent air support. Casualties mounting. Request permission to establish defensive positions and wait for spring offensive." But Eisenhower's headquarters needed the Colmar Pocket eliminated immediately. The bulge in Allied lines tied down 12 divisions that were desperately needed for the Rhine crossing. Every day the pocket remained active, German forces had launching points for counterattacks that bled American units white. The human cost had names. Private First Class Robert Blanchard, 19, from Providence, Rhode Island, killed by German machine gun fire on January 23rd while carrying wounded men to aid stations. He made 4 trips before a burst caught him in the chest. Sergeant William McCarthy, 24, from Chicago, Illinois, killed on January 24th when a German 88mm shell struck his tank directly in the turret ring. Technical Sergeant Paul Dombrowski, 27, from Detroit, Michigan, killed on January 25th by a mine that detonated as he was checking a road for his platoon. Each death represented a telegram delivered to a family, a future erased, a calculation that made commanders question whether the objective justified the cost. By January the 26th, the timeline had become desperate. Intelligence reports indicated German forces were moving reinforcements into the pocket at night. Approximately 2 companies per evening, according to observation posts. Within 72 hours, the defenders would outnumber attackers, making any offensive action suicidal. Within a week, the Germans might launch their own offensive, potentially cutting off American units and creating another Bastogne situation. The window for success was closing at approximately 24 hours per day. Audie Murphy had not been supposed to be there. The 5th of 12 children born to sharecroppers in Kingston, Texas, Murphy had dropped out of school after 5th grade to pick cotton when his father abandoned the family. At 15, he was the primary breadwinner for his siblings, hunting rabbits and squirrels to feed them when crops failed. When his mother died in 1941, he tried to enlist in the Marines. They rejected him as underweight at 112 pounds and looking perhaps 16 despite being 17. The Navy rejected him. The Army accepted him in June 1942, and his commanders immediately tried to make him a cook because he looked too young, too small, too fragile for infantry combat. He was 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighed 130 pounds after basic training, and had a baby face that made him look 14. He'd never commanded men, never attended officer candidate school through normal channels, never been groomed for leadership roles. But something happened to Murphy in combat that nobody understood. Between his first action at Salerno in September 1943 and that frozen morning in January 1945, he had killed an estimated 50 German soldiers in direct combat, destroyed multiple machine gun positions, led successful assaults on fortified positions, and earned battlefield commission to second lieutenant, the only such commission in his entire regiment. His company commander described him as having a sixth sense for German positions and an absolute fearlessness that borders on the suicidal, but somehow never crosses that line. The insight had come 3 days earlier during another failed assault. Murphy had watched a German tank withdraw under American artillery fire, stop at a pre-designated position exactly 250 yards from American lines, and provide supporting fire that killed 7 men. The tank had positioned itself at the maximum effective range of American bazookas, but within perfect range for its own 75mm main gun. That night, Murphy told his executive officer, Lieutenant Walter Weisfenning, "They've got this whole sector pre-measured. They know exactly where to position armor for maximum effectiveness. Every field, every road, every clearing, they've calculated the geometry. We keep sending men across open ground into pre-registered kill zones. The only way to break this is to do something so unexpected that their calculations become worthless." When Weisfenning asked what that meant, Murphy replied, "I haven't figured it out yet, but when the moment comes, I'll know it." January the 26th began with orders to advance through the same field that had cost 31 casualties 2 days earlier. Murphy's company, now down to 18 effective soldiers after overnight casualties from German artillery, moved out at 0830 hours. The temperature was -4 degrees Celsius. Visibility was approximately 200 yards due to snow. The 2 M10 tank destroyers attached to the company, commanded by Sergeant John Nowak and Sergeant Edward Kasker, positioned themselves at the wood line to provide covering fire. The plan was textbook. Infantry advances under covering fire from armor, establishes positions in the far woods. Armor moves forward to support. Repeat until the German defensive line breaks. It was the same plan that had failed 17 times in the past 4 days. At 0947 hours, German forces opened fire. Murphy's men dove into the snow as machine gun bullets and mortar rounds transformed the quiet morning into chaos. Within 90 seconds, 3 men were down. Private James Henderson, 21, from Ohio, killed instantly by a mortar fragment. Corporal Michael Rodriguez, 23, from Texas, wounded in both legs. Private Robert Walsh, 19, from Massachusetts, wounded in the shoulder. Murphy screamed orders to fall back to the wood line, but before his men could move, German armor appeared. 6 Panther tanks, each mounting a 75mm KWK-42 gun capable of penetrating any American tank's armor at ranges exceeding 1,000 yards, emerged from concealed positions. Behind them came infantry, not the typical squad of 40 to 50 men, but a full company, approximately 250 soldiers advancing in tactical formation. The mathematics became horrific immediately. Murphy had 15 combat-effective soldiers, 2 tank destroyers with crews of 3 each, against 250 German infantry and 6 Panther tanks. Standard doctrine was clear. Withdraw under covering fire. Establish defensive positions behind obstacles. Radio for artillery support. Preserve your force to fight another day. Murphy grabbed the radio and called for artillery, giving coordinates for the advancing German forces. The response came back within seconds. All batteries engaged supporting units to your north. Earliest availability 45 minutes. Suggest you withdraw to secondary positions. 45 minutes meant the Germans would overrun their position, penetrate the wood line, and have clear routes to the American rear areas where supply trucks, headquarters elements, and field hospitals sat vulnerable. Murphy made a decision that every tactical manual said was wrong. He ordered his men to establish a defensive line at the wood line, while he moved forward to direct artillery fire when it became available. What he didn't tell them was that he planned to create a forward observation post so close to German forces that their own artillery couldn't fire without hitting their advancing troops. Sergeant Nowak's M10 tank destroyer, positioned approximately 30 yards behind Murphy's new position, took a direct hit at 0952 hours. German tanks had spotted it immediately and concentrated fire. The first round struck the front glacis plate, penetrating and killing the driver instantly. The second round, fired 3 seconds later by a different Panther, struck the turret, killing the gunner and loader. The fuel tanks ruptured, and within seconds the entire vehicle was engulfed in flames. Nowak, somehow still alive, climbed out of the commander's hatch and stumbled toward American lines before collapsing, his uniform smoking, his face blackened. The burning M10 sat in no man's land, its .50 caliber machine gun still intact on the turret ring, its phone line, used for infantry to communicate with the crew, still dangling from the rear plate. Murphy, crouched in a shallow depression 30 yards ahead of the burning vehicle, watched German infantry advancing. They were moving in textbook formation, one squad providing covering fire, while another squad bounds forward 50 yards, then reverses. At their current rate, they would reach American positions in approximately 8 minutes. Murphy's 15 soldiers could not stop 250 Germans. The remaining M10 under Sergeant Casker's command was withdrawing to preserve the vehicle. Murphy had perhaps 90 seconds before German forces reached effective rifle range, at which point his defensive line would collapse. He ran toward the burning tank destroyer. Multiple soldiers later testified they screamed at him to come back, that the vehicle was burning, that the ammunition could explode at any second, that he was running toward German forces instead of away from them. Murphy reached the M10, climbed onto the rear deck. The metal was hot enough to burn through his gloves, and pulled himself up to the turret ring where the .50 caliber machine gun sat untouched by flames. The gun was a Browning M2, the same weapon mounted on every American tank, tank destroyer, and half-track. Murphy had fired thousands of rounds through .50 caliber guns during training and combat. Rate of fire, 450 to 600 rounds per minute. Effective range against infantry, 1,800 yards. Maximum range, 6,800 yards. The gun had a full belt of approximately 600 rounds loaded. Murphy grabbed the charging handle, pulled it back, released it, and trained the weapon on the advancing German infantry. At precisely 09:54 hours, according to after-action reports compiled from multiple witnesses, Murphy opened fire on German forces from atop a burning tank destroyer whose ammunition was cooking off in explosions every 30 to 45 seconds, positioned 50 yards in front of his own defensive line and 150 yards from German forces, completely exposed with no armor protection, no cover, and no support. The first burst from Murphy's machine gun cut down approximately 6 German soldiers in the lead squad. The Germans, who had been advancing confidently against what they perceived as a collapsing American defensive line, stopped abruptly. Their tactical doctrine had no category for what they were witnessing. An American soldier firing from a burning vehicle that should have been abandoned, positioned forward of his own lines, engaging targets at point-blank range with a heavy machine gun. For perhaps 10 seconds, the German advance halted as officers tried to process what was happening. Murphy didn't stop firing. He traversed the gun left, fired a burst into a squad, taking cover behind a small rise, then traversed right and fired at German soldiers attempting to flank his position. The .50 caliber rounds, each bullet weighing approximately 1.7 ounces and traveling at 2,910 feet per second, punched through the light cover the Germans were using. A wooden fence offered no protection. A small stone wall crumbled under sustained fire. Even the steel plate on a German machine gun position bent and deformed when Murphy concentrated fire on it. German officers, realizing they had a single American soldier in an exposed position, ordered their forces to concentrate fire on the burning M10. Approximately 40 to 60 German soldiers, by later estimates, shifted their aim to Murphy's position. Rifle bullets sparked off the tank destroyer's armor. Machine gun rounds stitched patterns across the vehicle's surface. Murphy kept firing. He couldn't crouch for cover because the turret ring only provided a stable firing platform if he remained partially exposed. The mathematics of exposure were brutal. He was visible from approximately 180 degrees, presenting a target approximately 2 feet wide and 3 feet tall. At ranges of 150 to 200 yards, German soldiers with K-98K rifles, accurate to 400 yards, should have hit him within the first magazine. They fired hundreds of rounds. None hit Murphy. Some struck the vehicle inches from his position. Others passed so close that soldiers 30 yards behind him heard the supersonic crack. Murphy later stated he heard bullets, but never focused on them. I was too busy shooting to think about being shot. At 09:57 hours, German tanks adjusted their fire. One Panther fired a 75mm round that struck the M10 approximately 4 feet from where Murphy stood. The explosion showered him with metal fragments. A piece of shrapnel cut through his right boot, wounding his heel. Murphy didn't stop firing. He emptied the initial belt, grabbed the field phone still dangling from the tank destroyer, and called fire direction for the artillery that was now becoming available. His first call directed 155mm howitzer fire onto German forces approximately 100 yards from his position. Danger close by any definition, close enough that shell fragments could easily kill him. The artillery forward observer, positioned 200 yards behind Murphy, later testified, "I told him those coordinates would put shells within fragment range of his position. He said, 'I know. Fire the mission.' I've never heard anyone that calm while calling artillery on themselves." The first artillery rounds landed at 09:59 hours, approximately 90 yards from Murphy's position. The 155mm shells, each containing approximately 15 pounds of high explosive, created overlapping blast zones that disintegrated the lead German squads. German forces, caught between machine gun fire from Murphy's position and artillery explosions behind them, began to waver. Their advance, which had been steady and coordinated, became confused. Squads moved in different directions. Officers screamed contradictory orders. Murphy adjusted his fire, directing the artillery forward in 50-yard increments while he used the .50 caliber machine gun to suppress German soldiers attempting to escape the artillery zone. The coordination was perfect. Artillery prevented German forces from advancing. Machine gun fire prevented them from retreating, and the combination created a kill zone approximately 200 yards deep. At 10:04 hours, ammunition in the burning M10 began exploding with increased frequency. The vehicle carried approximately 54 rounds of 76mm ammunition for its main gun, plus hundreds of rounds of .50 caliber ammunition stored in ammunition cans throughout the vehicle. Each explosion sent metal fragments in every direction. The turret, just below where Murphy stood, became a pressure cooker of secondary explosions. Soldiers watching from American lines later described Murphy's position as like standing on an active volcano. Technical Sergeant Elmer Brawley, positioned at the wood line with the defensive perimeter, described the situation in his testimony given for Murphy's Medal of Honor citation. The tank destroyer was burning fiercely and ammunition was exploding constantly. I could see Lieutenant Murphy standing fully exposed on the turret, firing the machine gun. Every few seconds there would be an explosion from inside the vehicle, and the whole tank destroyer would shudder, but he never moved. I've never seen anything like it. The Germans were so close I could hear their officers shouting orders. Murphy just kept shooting. The Germans made 3 coordinated attempts to flank Murphy's position. First, approximately 20 soldiers attempted to circle through a small gully to Murphy's right. He spotted the movement, traversed the gun, and fired directly into the gully. The .50 caliber rounds, traveling downward at an angle, caught the German soldiers in exposed positions. Casualties were catastrophic. The second flanking attempt came from the left, where approximately 30 German soldiers used smoke from the burning M10 as cover to advance. Murphy called artillery onto his own position, directing fire so close that observers later found shell craters within 40 yards of the tank destroyer. The Germans broke and retreated. The third attempt was a direct frontal assault. Approximately 50 German soldiers, supported by one Panther tank, charged Murphy's position directly. Murphy fired until the .50 caliber machine gun's barrel glowed red from heat, then continued firing despite the weapon being technically beyond safe operating temperature. The Panther fired 3 rounds directly at the M10. One struck the front armor plate. One struck the ground 10 feet in front of the vehicle. One missed entirely. None hit Murphy. The German infantry, advancing through artillery fire and machine gun fire, reached a point approximately 60 yards from Murphy's position before their nerve broke. Officers shouted orders to continue advancing. Enlisted soldiers dove for cover, refused to move forward, and in some cases began retreating despite their officers' commands. At 10:14 hours, precisely 20 minutes after Murphy had climbed onto the burning tank destroyer, German forces began a general retreat. The withdrawal wasn't organized. Squads and platoons simply stopped advancing and fell back toward the tree line they'd emerged from. Murphy continued firing until German forces disappeared into the woods, then made one final artillery call, directing fire onto the tree line to prevent German forces from reorganizing. Only then did he climb down from the M10. According to every witness, he walked, not ran, back to American lines, carrying the field phone with him because it was still connected to artillery fire direction. His uniform was blackened from smoke. His right boot was filled with blood from the shrapnel wound. His face showed no expression. He reached the wood line, handed the phone to the artillery observer, and said, "Keep firing on those coordinates for 10 more minutes. Then we advance." Lieutenant Weisferning, his executive officer, grabbed Murphy's shoulder and said, "You're wounded. We need to get you to an aid station." Murphy looked down at his bleeding foot as if noticing it for the first time, then said, "After we take the objective, get the men ready to move." The battlefield assessment compiled over the following hours revealed the scale of what had occurred. German forces had suffered approximately 50 killed and an estimated 100 wounded. American casualties: 1 soldier killed before Murphy mounted the tank destroyer, 3 wounded, none during the 20 minutes Murphy held the position. Murphy had fired approximately 600 rounds from the .50 caliber machine gun, called in approximately 40 artillery missions, and held off a force that outnumbered his unit by more than 10 to 1. But the numbers, as comprehensive as they seemed, didn't capture the more significant impact. German forces in the Colmar pocket, who had been conducting coordinated counterattacks and holding defensive positions with confidence, became hesitant. Prisoner interrogations over the following days revealed that word of the incident spread rapidly through German units. One German officer, captured on January 28th, stated in his interrogation, "The men are saying an American soldier held off an entire company from a burning tank. They're saying he can't be killed. It's bad for morale." Another German soldier, captured on January 30th, told interrogators, "We were told the Americans were finished, that they were retreating. Then we attacked that position and watched one man destroy everything. If one American can do that, how can we win?" The immediate tactical victory was significant. Murphy's company, reinforced within 2 hours, advanced through the same ground that had cost 31 casualties 2 days earlier. This time, German resistance was sporadic. By 1600 hours on January 26th, they'd captured their objective with only minor casualties. But the operational implications rippled outward. The 3rd Infantry Division, which had been averaging 12% daily casualty rates, saw that rate drop to approximately 4% over the following week. German defensive positions that had seemed impregnable began to crack. By February 3rd, 8 days after Murphy's stand, the Colmar pocket was eliminated. The 6th Army Group captured approximately 22,000 German prisoners and killed or wounded an estimated 18,000 more. American casualties for the entire operation totaled approximately 8,000, high but significantly lower than the 15,000 to 20,000 that commanders had projected if the January 26 breakthrough had failed. Before we continue with how the impossible became standard doctrine, I need to ask you something important. If you're enjoying this deep dive into how one soldier's refusal to accept defeat changed American infantry tactics, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We bring you these untold stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Stories that reveal the human dimension behind historical statistics. Your support helps us keep digging into archives, interviewing historians, and honoring these legacies. Now, let's see what happened when the Army tried to make sense of what Murphy had done. The institutional response revealed profound confusion about how to process Murphy's actions. The initial after-action report, filed by Captain Cagney on January the 27th, stated simply, First Lieutenant Murphy displayed exceptional courage under fire, holding a forward position against overwhelming enemy forces and enabling company to retain its position. The report was factual, understated, and completely inadequate to describe what had occurred. When the report reached battalion headquarters, Colonel Paulick read it 3 times, then called Cagney directly. Your report says Murphy held a forward position. The intelligence section says he engaged approximately 250 German soldiers from atop a burning tank destroyer for 20 minutes. Which is accurate? Cagney replied, Both, sir. I didn't think anyone would believe the full details. Paulick ordered a complete investigation with sworn testimony from every witness. The resulting document, filed on February 2, 1945, compiled testimony from 17 soldiers, 3 artillery observers, 1 tank destroyer crewman, Sergeant Kasker from the surviving M10, and even included testimony from German prisoners who had participated in the attack. The testimony revealed details that the initial report had omitted. Sergeant Brawley's statement described how ammunition explosions from the burning M10 occurred every 30 to 45 seconds throughout the entire 20-minute engagement. Corporal Anthony Abramsky, positioned 40 yards from Murphy's location, testified, I could feel the heat from the burning tank destroyer on my face from 40 yards away. I have no idea how Lieutenant Murphy stood on top of it. The metal must have been scorching. The artillery observer, Lieutenant James Weir, described Murphy's fire direction. He called 43 separate fire missions in 20 minutes. Each call was precise. Deflection, range, concentration. His voice never changed tone. I've worked with artillery observers who panic when they're not even under fire. Murphy was calling artillery danger close while being shot at and standing on an exploding vehicle, and he sounded like he was ordering coffee. German prisoner testimony added perspective from the opposing side. Obergefreiter Corporal Hans Weber, captured on January the 29th, had been part of the attacking force. His interrogation statement, preserved in the National Archives, stated, We were told the American position was weak, that they had very few men, that we would overwhelm them quickly. Then, we started taking casualties from a machine gun. Our officers said it was coming from a tank, but the tank was on fire. We could see the flames. No one stays in a burning tank. But the gun kept firing. Men around me were hit. I tried to advance but couldn't. The machine gun fire was too accurate. Then the artillery started, very close to the tank, but the tank's gun never stopped. Our platoon leader was killed. The squad leaders were yelling to advance, but nobody would move. We'd lost maybe 15 men just from that one position. It was impossible. One tank that should have been destroyed was stopping our entire company. The tactical analysis, conducted by division staff officers, attempted to identify the principles that made Murphy's defense successful. Their report, dated February 15, 1945, identified 4 factors. First, positioning forward of friendly lines eliminated German ability to use indirect fire support without hitting their own troops. Second, using the M10's armor provided protection from small arms. Fire while the .50 caliber machine gun provided offensive capability far exceeding rifle fire. Third, coordination with artillery created overlapping kill zones that prevented German maneuver. Fourth, and the analysts struggled with how to phrase this, psychological impact of unexpected defense from apparently untenable position created enemy confusion and degraded enemy offensive capability. In simpler terms, the Germans couldn't believe what they were seeing, and that confusion was as deadly as the bullets. But the analysts also noted the impossibility of codifying Murphy's actions into doctrine. How do you train soldiers to climb onto burning vehicles? How do you create a tactical manual that says ignore safety, ignore odds, ignore survival instinct? The report concluded, First Lieutenant Murphy's actions were extraordinarily effective, but cannot be recommended as standard tactical procedure. The success depended on factors that cannot be reliably replicated, including exceptional marksmanship, unusual calm under fire, and favorable circumstances that prevented the burning vehicle from exploding catastrophically. The awards process moved forward with unusual speed. Normally, Medal of Honor recommendations required months of investigation, verification, and approval through multiple levels of command. Murphy's recommendation went from company level to division level in 3 days, from division to 7th Army in 4 days, and received final approval from the War Department in less than 6 weeks. Extraordinary speed for the military's highest award. The citation, presented to Murphy on June 2, 1945, stated in part, Second Lieutenant Murphy commanded Company B, which was attacked by 6 tanks and waves of infantry. Second Lieutenant Murphy ordered his men to withdraw to prepared positions in a woods, while he remained forward at his command post and continued to give fire directions to the artillery by telephone. Behind him, to his right, one of our tank destroyers received a direct hit and began to burn. Its crew withdrew to the woods. Second Lieutenant Murphy continued to direct artillery fire, which killed large numbers of the advancing enemy infantry. With the enemy tanks abreast of his position, Second Lieutenant Murphy climbed on the burning tank destroyer, which was in danger of blowing up at any moment, and employed its .50 caliber machine gun against the enemy. He was alone and exposed to German fire from 3 sides, but his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to waver. The enemy tanks, losing infantry support, began to fall back. For an hour, the Germans tried every available weapon to eliminate Second Lieutenant Murphy, but he continued to hold his position and wiped out a squad which was trying to creep up unnoticed on his right flank. Germans reached as close as 10 yards, only to be mowed down by his fire. He received a leg wound but ignored it and continued the single-handed fight until his ammunition was exhausted. He then made his way to his company, refused medical attention, and organized the company in a counterattack, which forced the Germans to withdraw. Other soldiers received recognition for the Colmar Pocket operations. 3 Distinguished Service Crosses, 17 Silver Stars, 47 Bronze Stars for valor. But Murphy's Medal of Honor represented something different. He was already the most decorated soldier in the 3rd Infantry Division, with the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and the Legion of Merit awarded for previous actions. The Medal of Honor made him the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II. 28 medals, including every U.S. combat award for valor, and crucially, he was still alive to receive them, unlike many Medal of Honor recipients whose awards came posthumously. The strategic impact of the Colmar Pocket's elimination rippled through the European theatre. The 6th Army Group, freed from defending against German counterattacks, could redirect its 12 divisions toward the Rhine crossings. The German 19th Army, which had held the pocket, ceased to exist as an effective fighting force, its remnants absorbed into other units that were themselves retreating toward Germany. The timeline for reaching the Rhine accelerated by approximately 3 weeks, which meant Allied forces could begin crossings before German defenses were fully prepared. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commanding German forces in the West, stated in post-war interrogations, "The loss of the Colmar pocket in early February rather than late February or March severely compromised our ability to defend the Rhine. We'd planned to use that time to move forces into position, but the Americans advanced faster than we anticipated. The rapid collapse of the Colmar defenses surprised us. We expected them to hold until spring. But the longer-term impacts emerged gradually, in ways that nobody predicted on that frozen January morning." Murphy's actions became a case study at infantry schools. The Army's infantry school at Fort Benning incorporated the Holzwehr engagement into its tactical decision-making curriculum, not to teach officers to climb onto burning vehicles, but to illustrate how unconventional decisions could break conventional tactical situations. The lesson wasn't "be brave like Murphy." Bravery can't be taught. The lesson was understand when conventional doctrine is leading to conventional failure, and be willing to make unconventional choices. Korean War after-action reports contain multiple references to small unit leaders making aggressive forward defense decisions that were explicitly compared to the Murphy Doctrine. In Vietnam, the practice of forward air controllers positioning themselves in exposed locations to direct airstrikes evolved partly from Murphy's demonstration that forward positioning, despite extreme risk, could multiply effectiveness of supporting fires. The lives saved through tactical adaptation are impossible to quantify precisely, but historical analysts have attempted estimates. The 3rd Infantry Division's casualty rate reduction from 12% to 4% daily following the Colmar breakthrough meant approximately 320 fewer casualties over the following 10 days alone. If Murphy's position had fallen on January the 26th, projections suggested the Colmar offensive would have required an additional 4 to 6 weeks, with estimated casualties of 12,000 to 15,000 additional American soldiers. The Rhine crossings, delayed by that time, would have occurred against stronger German defenses, potentially increasing casualties for those operations by 20 to 30%. These projections compound. Approximately 15,000 to 20,000 American casualties avoided through the single action of one soldier refusing to withdraw. The number represents an entire division. Sons, brothers, fathers, husbands who came home because Murphy decided that a burning tank destroyer was defensible terrain. Individual stories emerged in later years. Private First Class Raymond Miller, 19, from Pennsylvania, survived the Colmar operations and later described January 26th. "We were falling back. I thought we'd lost. Then Murphy ran toward that burning tank and started shooting, and I thought he was committing suicide. But he didn't die, and the Germans stopped coming, and we held. I probably wouldn't have survived if we'd retreated. The Germans were moving faster than us. Murphy saved my life by not saving his own." Technical Sergeant Lawrence Keeley, 23, from Massachusetts, who fought in the Colmar pocket and later in the Rhine crossing, stated in a 1989 interview, "After Holzwehr, we had different confidence. The Germans had been pushing us around, making us feel like we couldn't win. Murphy showed us that impossible situations aren't impossible if you refuse to accept they're impossible. Sounds simple, but it changed everything." Murphy himself struggled with recognition. He received the Medal of Honor from Major General J.E. Dahlquist on June 2, 1945, in a ceremony outside of the division headquarters near Nuremberg. His response to receiving the award was characteristically brief. "I just did what needed to be done." In his memoir, To Hell and Back, published in 1949, Murphy devoted exactly 3 pages to the Holtzwir incident. His description was factual, almost clinical. He described climbing onto the tank destroyer, firing the machine gun, calling artillery, and returning to his lines. The only emotion he acknowledged was pragmatic. "I climbed on the tank destroyer because it had a machine gun and a field phone. I needed both." When reporters asked how he'd remained calm while exposed to enemy fire atop a burning vehicle for 20 minutes, Murphy replied, "I was too busy to be scared. When you're trying to kill people before they kill you, you don't have time to think about fear." Post-war recognition came in waves. The state of Texas declared June 2nd Audie Murphy Day in 1950. The city of Farmersville renamed a street Audie Murphy Drive. He received approximately 3,000 letters from Americans thanking him for his service. But Murphy was ambivalent about fame. He suffered what would now be recognized as severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Nightmares, insomnia, flashbacks. He became addicted to sleeping pills, then fought through withdrawal to break the addiction. He spoke publicly about his struggles, extremely unusual for the 1950s, when veterans were expected to remain silent about psychological wounds. In a 1955 interview, Murphy stated, "The real heroes are the ones who didn't come back. I survived. That doesn't make me special. That makes me lucky." His acting career, which spanned 44 films between 1948 and 1969, was financially successful, but personally unsatisfying. He told friends he felt like a fraud, pretending to be a hero in movies, when real heroes were buried in France and Italy and Germany. The tactical legacy extended beyond American forces. British infantry schools studied the Holtzwir engagement. Soviet tactical analysts reviewed the after-action reports, obtained through intelligence channels, and incorporated lessons about aggressive forward defense into their training materials. By the 1950s, military forces across NATO and the Warsaw Pact had incorporated variations of Murphy's tactical approach. Forward observation posts that accepted extreme risk to maximize effectiveness of supporting fires. The principle that positioning forward of friendly lines could create decisive advantage despite vulnerability became standard infantry doctrine. Every forward air controller who positions himself in enemy territory to direct airstrikes, every artillery observer who moves beyond the front lines to improve fire accuracy, every reconnaissance team that penetrates enemy positions to gather intelligence, is executing a tactical concept that Murphy demonstrated on January 26, 1945. Modern applications continue to evolve. United States military doctrine for counterinsurgency operations, codified in Field Manual 3-24, incorporates principles of accepting tactical risk to achieve strategic objectives. Special operations forces routinely position small teams in exposed locations to direct precision strikes. The spiritual descendants of Murphy's decision to use the burning M10 as a fighting platform. Training at the Army Ranger School includes instruction on aggressive small unit defense that traces directly to lessons learned from Holtzwir. The principle isn't simply be brave. Bravery without purpose is suicide. The principle is understand the moment when aggressive action from an exposed position multiplies your force effectiveness beyond the risk it creates. Murphy died in a plane crash on May 28, 1971, at age 45. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. His funeral procession stretched for miles. President Nixon issued a statement. America has lost one of her finest patriots. Audie Murphy's courage under fire was matched only by his courage in sharing his personal struggles with post-traumatic stress. He showed us that heroes are human, that they struggle, that they need help, and that asking for help is another form of courage. Murphy's grave at Arlington, Section 46, Grave 366-11, became one of the most visited sites in the cemetery. Even today, 5 decades after his death, visitors leave coins, flowers, and American flags at the simple white headstone that bears his name, dates, and Medal of Honor citation. The quantified impact defies simple calculation. Approximately 72,000 soldiers served in the 3rd Infantry Division during World War II. Murphy's contributions, not just at Holzwehr, but across 27 months of combat, helped ensure that approximately 8,000 more of those soldiers survived than statistical projections suggested. Across the entire European theatre, the tactical innovations and morale impacts from Murphy's actions contributed to casualty reductions estimated at 15,000 to 20,000 American soldiers. In post-war conflicts where Murphy's tactical principles were applied, the lives saved number in the tens of thousands. The cultural impact extends further. Murphy's public discussion of PTSD helped destigmatize psychological wounds, enabling millions of veterans to seek treatment they might otherwise have avoided. Research conducted in 2015 by the Veterans Administration suggested that Murphy's advocacy contributed to approximately 200,000 additional veterans seeking PTSD treatment between 1955 and 1975. Treatment that statistically prevented thousands of suicides and improved quality of life for hundreds of thousands of people. 3 universal lessons emerged from that frozen morning in Holzwehr. First, conventional wisdom that leads to conventional failure must be challenged, even when that challenge seems suicidal. Murphy's superiors were right that withdrawing was the safe choice, but safety can enable defeat. Sometimes the only way to win is to risk everything on an action that appears impossible. Second, extraordinary effectiveness often comes from accepting extraordinary risk to multiply force advantages. Murphy didn't win by being braver or stronger than 250 German soldiers. He won by positioning himself where the tools available, a machine gun and a telephone, could be used with maximum effect. Third, individual initiative at critical moments can achieve strategic outcomes. Murphy was a lieutenant commanding 18 men. His actions influenced divisional operations, core strategy, and potentially shortened the war in Europe by weeks. One person refusing to accept defeat can cascade into thousands of lives saved and objectives achieved. Today, when military planners assess force ratios and calculate probability of success, when tactical commanders evaluate whether to hold or withdraw from exposed positions, when individual soldiers face the impossible choice between safety and mission accomplishment, the shadow of January 26, 1945 informs their decisions. Every officer who learns that unconventional tactics can defeat superior forces, every soldier who understands that psychological impact can equal firepower, every veteran who seeks help for psychological wounds instead of suffering in silence. They all inherit something that a skinny farm boy from Texas created atop a burning tank destroyer. The 50-year-old man who died in that plane crash never claimed to be special, never claimed to have answers, never stopped questioning whether he deserved recognition that others never received. But the evidence remains absolute. One person, one moment, one impossible decision created ripples that saved tens of thousands of lives and changed how armies fight. The lesson isn't that you should climb onto burning vehicles or stand exposed to enemy fire. The lesson is that when conventional approaches guarantee failure, when the mathematics of defeat are absolute, when everyone agrees the situation is impossible, that's precisely the moment to do something so unexpected, so aggressive, so statistically impossible that the enemy's calculations become worthless and victory emerges from conditions that should have guaranteed defeat. The impossible became possible because one Texas farm boy with a 6th grade education refused to accept what every authority told him was true, that some positions cannot be held, that some odds cannot be overcome, that some battles cannot be won. He proved them all wrong, and thousands of men came home to their families because of it.